There's a relatively new phenomenon in bodybuilding called distended gut or palumboism. It's been blamed on numerous factors: insulin, HGH, immaculate conception. But however it happens, it's definitely gotten so out of control that it threatens to destroy whatever's left of bodybuilding as a sport. So help us bulk up by hitting that subscribe button, and let's take a look at the worst examples of people with distended guts. Scott Steiner.
Look at that. Getting a pump.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Scott Steiner isn't even a bodybuilder. He's a wrestler. Well, considering he shows up in a lot of bodybuilding videos and articles and was once known as one of the most built men on the planet, he seemed like a good fit for this list. On top of that, he actually has something more than just pure bubble gutitis going on. He also has a gigantic separation in the middle of his chest that's becoming more and more apparent as he ages. It's been discussed ad nauseum online, and people can't seem to figure out exactly what's going on with his entire torso. But it's apparent that he's at least aware of it, as he's gotten a gigantic tattoo to cover up the middle of his chest and often wears something to disguise his bubble gut.
Come on, straddle me. Oh my God.
I love it when you take that.
Oh, you give me inspiration, baby.
Either way, if the sheer number of premature deaths don't scare you off of stuff like anabolic steroids or human growth hormone, then results like Steiner definitely should. With that out of the way, let's talk about actual bodybuilders.
This is Big Papa Pump, and you just witnessed me in my freak zone.
Phil Heath.
Anyone that's hating, your life probably sucks, doesn't it?
Phil Heath is the only person on this list under the age of 40. At 37 years old, he's an extremely well-known bodybuilder and the most successful this century, winning 7 straight Mr. Olympia competitions, which, if you haven't heard of it, it's kind of like the Super Bowl of bodybuilding. However, as Heath has gotten older, he's definitely developed a case of bubble guts. It's actually his rise, along with that of his competition, that's really poured gas on the fire that has been bubble guts in the sport over the last few years. Numerous pictures of the final contestants were labeled as horrible, and even the Mr. Pregnant show, forcing the legend of all legends in the game that is bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to comment on the state of bubble guts in the industry. Arnold stated that perhaps there needs to be a change to how the contests are scored in order to penalize the lack of aesthetics in the sport.
And then the stomach hangs out.
The sport used to be all about the V-shaped body, and now it really only cares about bulk and mass.
Now, I don't know, it's like kind of like a bottle-shaped body or something like that.
While Arnie admits that even he had to suck in his stomach from time to time, things have definitely gotten out of control, and this most recent Mr. Olympia is a testament to that fact. Jean-Pierre Fuchs.
I could hardly breathe. I used to sit out there in the car, like...
Outside of the hilarious last name, Pierre Fuchs, yeah, I just bet he does, is mostly known for a terrible accident that occurred during a weightlifting session and almost ended his career. He was attempting to squat almost 700 pounds while at Gold's Gym in Fullerton, California. While initially lifting the amount, during a photo shoot for Flex magazine, he suddenly collapsed with the full weight on his back. He describes the accident as follows, saying, "We'd worked up to 7 plates on each side. The weight's not a problem for me. I'd done the same thing a week earlier for my training video. I began to squat down and everything was fine. Then in a split second, I went from complete comfort to collapse. My knees just went. I crashed down so quickly, the spotters didn't even have time to react. Afterward, they felt bad about it, but it was so quick, nobody could have caught the weight."
Then the right leg started twisting around and the patella snapped off. And...
Luckily, he was prepared for such an accident and knew that if he wanted to save the tendons in his knees, he should keep his legs straight. So once the weight was removed, he straightened his legs and that most likely saved his tendons. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital and was wheelchair bound for a long time, which is perhaps the source of his bubble gut. Or maybe it was the drugs he took to catch up after his injury. His injury is so well known because he urged both Flex magazine and the photographer who took pictures to actually publish them in order to help people know what to do when they're injured, which is super cool and makes you hope that he can now conquer his biggest test of all, the bubble gut.
It's almost impossible.
Kai Green.
Stay tuned because we still got some really awesome things coming.
Phil Heath's most consistent competition has been Kai Green, who finished second at the 2012, 2013, and 2014 Mr. Olympias behind Heath. He also won the 2016 Arnold Classic that should at least punish someone like Green for having a bottle shape as opposed to the classic V shape Arnold and everyone with eyeballs prefers.
We don't need Kai, we don't need it.
Green has a tough background, growing up in the foster care system and residential treatment centers. Because of that, he acted out. And luckily for him, his science teacher noticed that he had behavioral problems and also a genetic gift. So he helped him pursue bodybuilding to take advantage of those gifts while giving him a place to funnel all of his anger and emotion.
I couldn't say where I was going to go, what I was going to do, when I was going to eat, when I was going to be told to go to bed.
What's so sad about this current trend is you hear these amazing stories about how bodybuilding can save a life like Green's. But at the same time, all of that work is essentially going down the drain because it appears that bubble guts are permanent and there's really nothing that these guys can do, and thus their careers will be over. Now, granted, a lot of them are fairly old, and Green, at 42, is at the tail end of his career. But still, you'd hate to see an entire generation of bodybuilders wasted because drugs were taken too far. Ronnie Coleman.
I wasn't bloated. I didn't have to bloat the stomach and all that kind of stuff.
If Phil Heath is the most successful bodybuilder of this decade, then Ronnie Coleman was the most successful bodybuilder of the 90s. He won 8 Mr. Olympias in a row, and also holds the record for the most IFBB professional wins at a staggering 26. He's now retired and 53 years old, so you can't expect him to be in peak shape, but it is sad to see someone who's as huge as Coleman fall victim to bubble guts. This guy is a complete beast and makes a lot of his competition look small by comparison.
Jay Cutler smoking crack and he ain't in his right mind.
And that's helped offset the obviousness of his protruding stomach. But really, if anyone should be the poster boy for whatever causes distended gut, or as it's better known, Palumboism, it should be Coleman. You'll notice that while Arnold did gain a gut in his later years, it was a natural gut, made of fat and sagging tissue, not one that appears to be made of pure muscle. So, something that these guys were either doing in the late 90s or doing recently is causing this to either manifest years later when they're around 45 to 50, or their older bodies just can't handle it. Marcus Rule.
There's only one word that can best describe our next bodybuilder, and that word is freak.
At 5'10" and around 310 pounds, even around other bodybuilders, Marcus Rule is considered to be a huge guy with gigantic arms and legs that many of his peers just don't have. A lot of what bodybuilding at least used to be is symmetry and what's aesthetically pleasing. So while that's obviously subjective and can change from era to era, a lot of guys don't go for massive bulk, as there are also scores for how lean someone is, how vascular they look, and so on. So, while that means he may not win every competition because of his pure bulk, Rule has actually weathered the bubble gut era pretty well despite having one himself. His massive arms and legs help cover up the fact that he does have a distended stomach. A distended stomach which really makes him look more like a Ninja Turtle action figure than something like a He-Man action figure, which, one can assume, is not what he was going for when he started bodybuilding. Can you say cowabunga?
Cowabunga.
King Kamali.
Some of us were born with genetically monstrous calves.
King Kamali is a 45-year-old bodybuilder. He was born in Tehran, Iran, but now lives in New York City. Sadly, 45 is around the life expectancy of most bodybuilders thanks to the abuse that they do to their bodies, which is extremely ironic considering bodybuilding is a health-related sport. Nicknamed the Persian Pearl for some reason, and the Terminator, which is a pretty bad nickname when you compete in the same sport as, like, the real Terminator.
Hey, I think this guy's a couple cans short of a six-pack.
You're close. Give them to me.
Kamali actually has a Bachelor of Science degree in exercise physiology from George Mason University, meaning he should know better than anyone why he's suffering from bubble gut and what to do to fix it. However, it does seem like a lot of the examples of bubble guts in the sport end up happening to older men as opposed to younger ones, so perhaps it has more to do with age than anything else. Either way, he's clearly past his prime and shouldn't be competing anymore, as there's really no point. But what do I know? I don't have a Bachelor of Science in exercise physiology. Greg Kovacs.
There's going to be room for every type of physique in the sport, and that's how it should be, not just going toward one extreme or the other.
As just mentioned, 45 seems to be the age that most bodybuilders end up dying. A fact driven home by learning about Greg Kovacs' life and career. Kovacs was a Canadian bodybuilder who passed away in 2013 at the age of 45 due to heart failure. Now, before discussing his career a bit, we should really look at the fact that these men are killing themselves over something that shouldn't be deadly. No one would argue that bodybuilders in the early 70s or before didn't look a lot better than the ones do today. And perhaps that's why the natty movement has really gained a lot of steam lately. But when your sport needs a natural division because of the rampant drug use and oil injection, maybe it's time for your sport to stop being a sport, especially when most of your icons die of, quote, natural causes before their 50th birthdays. Either way, Kovacs was a beast among beasts. He was actually the largest pro bodybuilder there was in the latter half of the 90s, at 6'4" and an off-season weight of 330 pounds. His arms measured 25 inches, his chest 70 inches, and his legs a colossal 35 inches.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy.
That didn't help hide the bubble gut towards the end of his career, though. Big Lenny.
For Brad, can you do the whole transition, like start normal?
Transsexual, you said?
No, transition.
Some people actually believe Palumboism should have been called Lennyism, because the bodybuilder known as Big Lenny definitely rocks the biggest bubble gut of any man, woman, or child in the known world. In fact, he's more stomach than man at this point, and while he's muscular as compared to a regular person, he doesn't really seem to be in that great shape. He also appears to give 0 Fs about it, at least in most of his pictures.
Untouchable.
Like many others on this list, he's definitely past his prime. But considering how he looks now, I'm not sure he ever technically had a prime. Called Big Lenny because of his astonishing height, there's a video of Lenny on YouTube where he discusses his case of bubble guts. In the 21-minute video, he blames too much cardio for the fact that his legs are smaller than his stomach. On that subject, he says that his belly isn't going anywhere as it's large and hard, and blames it on the fact that he used to weigh 450 pounds.
Phil Heath, what do you weigh, Phil? You get to sleep and eat all day.
He says that essentially he'll build the rest of his muscles around his stomach to compensate. And while he does say that he doesn't take any of the stuff people blame bubble guts on, there's no way that a human being gets this large without having taken some sort of performance-enhancing drug. If he was telling the truth, that'd be great, as he calls drug users half-assers and corner cutters. But it wouldn't be a surprise to find out he's lying about where that gut's coming from.
And she says, yeah, you're showing severe muscle wasting.
Dave Palumbo.
Yeah. Harry Houdini always said, it doesn't matter what they say about you as long as they spell your name right.
Thanks to a YouTube channel titled Nick's Strength and Power, Dave Palumbo will forever be remembered as the man who changed the term distended gut from bubble gut to Palumboism. And the new name has infiltrated the bodybuilding world for sure. Like the other members of this list, Palumbo's getting up there in age, at 49, and is definitely past his prime. Perhaps better than most people on this list, he represents the 90s era of bodybuilding as the gigantic, unnatural, and hypervascular type of builder. He's retired now, but still works in the industry, serving as the editor of Muscular Development magazine and the CEO of RX Muscle. I can't imagine that being the namesake for a term as embarrassing as Palumboism is great for his brand, the sales of his supplements, or his self-image. A lot of bodybuilders are known to suffer from a form of body dysmorphia called bigorexia, in which they're never happy with their appearance and can never quite get big enough. Maybe that's why a lot of these guys just destroy their bodies with all sorts of injections and pills. While many have died over the years,
Because of all the years of damage.
the fact that death hasn't stopped them just shows how important being big is to them. Maybe the silver lining in all of these bubble guts is the fact that it looks terrible. So it may finally be the impetus for change in an industry that's so drug-ridden that it has separate competitions for people who don't take drugs. Imagine if Major League Baseball had a steroids-free division. Oh wait, they used to. It was called the AL Central in the 90s. Either way, Palumbo truly is an icon in the sport, and he's used that to great advantage at many points.
Palumbo was in fact jailed for 10 months for selling steroids.
What do you think? Was this list big enough? Sound off in the comments below. Check out our other videos, and thanks for watching.